healthcare. My dad lost his life prematurely because of a lack of affordable access to healthcare. And so I'm running to be a voice for those that are disadvantaged, underrepresented. Here in Idaho, we lack any veteran representation in Congress and even at the statewide elected level. So I'm grateful to be here, and it's an honor to be joining you. So thank you for letting me participate in this forum.
Thank you, Rudy. And we're going to go ahead and have Joe Evans, our Libertarian candidate. If you can introduce yourself again, now that we've got a stable connection with the Facebook Live, Joe, thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm Joe Evans. I'm a United States Army veteran. I did 4 tours in the Middle East, 1 in Iraq, 3 in Afghanistan. I've also done tours in Haiti, as well as the Philippines. I have 5 children. I am currently divorced and a geographically challenged father of 5. 2 of my children are currently serving in the United States military, 1 in the Air Force in South Korea, the other currently at Fort Bragg, North Carolina. And peace. One of the things that we're looking forward to is a way to bring our troops home and make sure that the forever wars that we're currently fighting never come back. So when it comes to a lot of peace activism and items along those lines, I've been very active over the last several years with a couple different organizations in the Valley. And I really hope to be able to take some of that forward with me into Congress. And thank you for having me this evening.
And thank you for being here, Joe. And we do not have our 3rd candidate tonight, Representative Russ Fulcher, the Republican candidate. After attempting to reach out to his campaign, we were not able to schedule him for this event, but we're hoping to have a conversation with him in the future so that we can share his position on some of these important policy points that we're going to cover tonight sometime in the near future. And with that said, we're going to get started. Our first question this evening will be coming from one of our representatives from within the Idaho Veterans Wellness Center. His name is Matt Denning. Matt?
Yes, thanks for having me as well. First question is regarding mental health suicide with our military family members. The suicide rates for veterans in Idaho is 17% higher than the national average. And as these numbers continue to rise here and across the country, how important do you feel that this issue is?
And Rudy, we'll go ahead and have you start first and then followed by Joe.
Good to go. All right. Thank you for the question, Matt. One of the greatest privileges I had while wearing the U.S. Military uniform was serving as part of the military funeral honor guard. I spent a year doing that on a traveling team that did it throughout the state of Oregon, where I was in the Army National Guard. And so I saw up close and in person a lot of families that were shattered by soldiers, our fellow brothers and sisters who took their own lives. I have soldiers that I served with that have also done that, and that carries on with everyone else who knows them and loves them. And so it's a big issue. We need to do a lot more to provide more access and funding and resources and awareness about existing programs to promote them. And, that goes hand in hand with reducing stigma and, crafting a different message around post-traumatic stress syndrome not as a disorder but as an injury. And so we all understand if anyone is injured, you know, we treat it, we support them, you know, we don't leave any battle buddy behind. And so that's how we need to treat and look at this. And so you know, I think it's deeply unfortunate that we are at the highest rates in the country for this this epidemic, and I believe that that's reflected in part because the people in government at the top that decide what the priorities are not veterans. And so I think we need more veterans in office at every level.
Thank you very much, Rudy. And Joe?
22 a day. That's the number that's become the common number for suicides among veterans and non-U.S. military service members. This is one of those severe issues, and as Rudy mentioned, post-traumatic stress injury is a huge impact on that. We go forward, we do battle downrange, we come back with wounds unseen, and in many cases seen. A lot of the time, this affects our ability to work when we come back to the United States. If we separate from the military, it affects our ability to integrate into the communities. And in a lot of cases, a lot of veterans are unable to find an appropriate form of coping mechanism or the medication that actually works for them the best. We continue to see promising attributes all across the United States with a number of different treatments that I hope to be able to advance further as these things continue to develop. But one of these is medical marijuana. Idaho is one of those states that still won't allow medical marijuana for the use of veterans, and has been proven to be successful across the United States in many cases, and allows them to cope and continue to function as a functional part of society while they're using this medical option. Until we can actually find means that are a means to go in and fix, to heal post-traumatic stress injury in a comprehensive, holistic manner, we need to make sure that all options are on the table for our veterans and for our service members. Thank you.
A quick follow-up on that one. You have both touched on a couple of your ways you will deal with it. If you're elected, what immediate
Thank you
action
very much, Joe.
will you take to assist the military, our military family, to heal and assure their safety?
So I would just say that, you know, I would push for more funding for telehealth, for programs in rural communities, so that we don't have people that have to travel long distances or struggle to get appointments, so that we can mitigate challenges of access. But it definitely has a lot to do with resources and a public awareness campaign to just bring down stigma that people have around seeking help. And so, you know, I think we need like a national campaign, and there's a lot of people taking it into their own hands with the, you know, 22, you know, push-ups and calling out others and helping increase awareness. But we need that backed by government resources so that we don't lose a single more.
Matt, thank you for that question. So I think mainly what you're looking at is the interactions and relationships when people come home from combat, they're suffering from the post-traumatic stress injury, and the family doesn't understand, doesn't have the means or capacity to actually cope with the injuries that the service member is coming back with. What we need to be able to do is work with organizations such as Idaho Veterans Network and Idaho Female Veterans Network that have trauma-informed care practices as an essential part of their program. Supplement those, if necessary, with VA funds in order to make sure that those service members and their families are integrated into the treatments, that make sure that they understand the nature of post-traumatic stress injury and how it affects their service members specifically. simply because there is no one solution and there is no one reaction to post-traumatic stress injury. And we continue to see that develop across the nation. What we think will work for one person doesn't work for another. So back to trauma-informed care and flexibility, and making sure that the resources are available at home in the communities that the service member and their families go back to when they're done with service.
All right, gentlemen, thank you very much. The next question will be coming from Mark Tuggle, also from the Idaho Veterans Wellness Center. Mark.
Hello. Statistics from the Department of Veterans Affairs shows us that more than 50% of service members returning from OIF and OEF have PTSIs. How will you ensure that these symptoms are identified while people are still serving, that service members have access to treatment immediately, and the quality of treatment within the VA is sufficient?
Are we just doing it in the same order each time?
I'll let you have it, Rudy.
All right. You know, I would say that we need more frontline workers. We need more frontline community workers, and that extends to active components as well as National Guard elements. And so, you know, for instance, you know how you have chaplains and chaplains assistants embedded within, you know, unit, you know, battalion structures to where they go out and they check in with people. We need one assigned, you know, like per every, you know, 60 soldiers, or per, you know, per every 50 soldiers. We need, it's such a serious and staggering and severe problem that we need more people dedicated to catching the early warning signs, so we can root this out, address it, get people, you know, directed to the services and supports that are available to them. And you know, oftentimes, you know, mental health challenges can come from financial challenges because of, you know, issues that they're dealing with because of, you know, at their place of employment. So, you know, we just need a more holistic approach to supporting the individual service member. And so I think we need to look at creating more MOSs that are embedded in our unit structures that are about, you know, the whole person, the whole service member. And so, you know, I think we got to think outside the box here. And you know, we're in the 21st century, and you know, we got to integrate new ideas into this dynamic force that we've evolved into.
And so when I got back, this actually took my third trip to Afghanistan to come back from before this was fully realized. The resiliency training upon returning from theater was an essential part of that redeployment back to the United States. In addition to that, we also had embedded psychologists and social workers that were able to sit down and talk with individuals as they came back, so that we could attempt to destigmatize PTSI as it related to combat operations downrange. In addition to that, those embedded individuals needed to be outside of the chain of command, outside the chain of concern. They needed to be completely independent of the unit that they were assisting. That way, in case things came out such as war crimes downrange, violations of code of conduct, and military sexual trauma, it was able to be addressed without being dealt with within the chain of command, where any dissenting opinions or appearances of impropriety were easily squashed. In addition to that, once we get back, there's the trauma of reintegration into civilian society, and it really does need to be addressed. That includes work programs and we need to go beyond what is considered the reintegration program that they offered during the last 6 months of service into operations. Hire Heroes is one that's done fairly well. Wyakin Warriors here at Boise State University has done an exceptional program, particularly with post 9/11 GI Bill and Wounded Warriors. We really do need to take a look at those options for reintegration so that service members, veterans, have an ability to integrate back into civilian life effectively and holistically once they get back here into the United States and separate.
All right, gentlemen, thank you very much. The next question, again, will be coming from Mark Tuggle. And this one covers more topics on mental health.
Morgan, I believe that was going to be directed by me or facilitated by me, this next question, regarding what Joe slightly touched on with mental health and transition back into civilian life. So many veterans have difficulty integrating into society after deployments, discharge, and retirement. Many fall into unhealthy escapisms in order to cope, and the tidal wave of self-defeating aftermath that follows is tremendous, creating an even greater burden on social, medical, housing, and legal services. Doesn't it make sense to invest in preventative care measures through community centers and psychosocial services? What are your thoughts and potential policy proposals to support these needs?
All right, I'll jump on that. So thank you, Matt. So I'm a big proponent of breaking down the divisions between agencies to forge stronger partnerships across agencies. And there's some good examples in a number of places. We really lack access to care for folks in our rural communities, in our reservation communities. And where partnerships can be had between community health centers or Indian health centers, you know, with VA hospitals, it's all the better for everyone. Veteran service organizations can match and pair funds with a variety of resources, and those centers can be a hub that can help people holistically, like we've talked about with employment or with childcare. So I'm a strong proponent of that, and I'd be looking to figure out ways to streamline the ability for agencies to form memorandums of understanding between one another, so that in specific regions and places where that makes sense, it's absolutely pursued and made possible. Instead of having a whole lot of red tape and competition for funding and resources, it makes sense, and it needs to be more widespread.
One of the things that you talk about is reintegration back into the community. As you said, we have problems with housing, we have problems with maintaining jobs. We have a number of other issues. The items where we seek coping mechanisms, alcoholism, drugs, homelessness, until we just continue to deteriorate, often with disastrous effects relating to relationships, whether that's personal, family, even with parents when we return back home. Some of the best programs that I've seen integrated so far include organizations like the Idaho Veterans Network, Idaho Veterans Wellness Center. They do a good job of bringing people in, integrating them, helping them cope. Again, I'm going to bring back Wyakin Warriors at Boise State University in the program that they pioneered. It's an exceptional program. It sets them up for success. It pairs them with individuals who have come back and have proven success in post-service careers so that they can continue to develop and work and mature in the community, learning from people who have already succeeded, as opposed to trying to find their own way down a path of almost certain failure. So again, it's back to those issues where we use local community nonprofits. And with regards to post-traumatic stress injury, particularly with regards to what Rudy mentioned, Paulette Jordan did a fairly decent job as one of the leaders in her community to make sure that Indigenous people, Indigenous veterans who have come back with PTSI were able to integrate with trauma-informed care through the lens of the culture that they were going to be reintegrating into. And I honestly believe that that more than anything else is important. Make sure that these veterans are introduced back into the culture that they will be living in post-service so that they can feel more at home, so they feel brought back into the fold as one of the prodigal sons and daughters that went forth to do battle for the United States.
All right, gentlemen, thank you very much. And we're going to move on to the next topic for the evening. We've got Rosie Mustik from the Idaho Female Veterans Network. And we're going to be covering the topic of sexual assault in the military. Rosie, you have the floor.
Thank you, appreciate that. So at least 32% of women who have served in the military report having been sexually assaulted, along with more than 80% who have been sexually harassed. Last year, the number of sexual assaults reported in the Air Force grew by 9%. Knowing that the number of cases which go unreported are much higher, why do you feel these numbers are so high?
So the numbers are so high because of the structure for reporting. You know, with it kind of goes to the point that Joe made about needing access to reporting outside of the chain of command, where there could be a conflict of interest with, you know, holding the individual accountable. For instance, you know, that individual that could and should be held accountable could be the commander themselves, or, you know, someone that serves as a, you know, in the Army, the XO to the commander. These things are not uncommon. And so, you know, we need to reform the structure for how those are addressed and dealt with by creating independent military tribunals that investigate and pursue these cases that are reported.
So you mentioned that upwards of 80% of the 80% of female service members suffer sexual harassment at some point. I've actually heard numbers that upwards of 2 out of 3 service members experience some sort of sexual assault or rape. And that's 2 out of 3 of the females. That doesn't even take into consideration our combat arms, our male military members as well. And in my service and in talking with several veterans, I've had experience, not personal, but friends and soldiers have experienced rape. And I've come to find out about problems within a number of units after I separated from those units. This is a serious problem, and I don't know that there's really any solid solution because this is systemic within the United States military. I remember talking to a lieutenant who told me about her experience in ROTC. This was a service member, you know, this was ROTC before they even went in. And the ROTC program actually tried to squash the program so that they can squash the report so that they could make sure that that service, that cadet could continue to go on and serve as an officer who would eventually be a commanding officer with an already established pattern of predatory behavior. This is systemic. It is going to be an extremely difficult process to root out of the United States military, and this is in all branches. You know, it's not just in the ROTC programs, it's also in the academies. The continued reports that come out of West Point, the Air Force Academy, and Annapolis continue to be a serious problem. And my service initially as a field artilleryman back in 94, 95, 96. Sexual harassment used to be called hazing. Well, it still is hazing, and it continues to exist. This is between men, you know, each other in single, units. I don't know, as Rudy pointed out, we need a system completely outside of the chain of command that people are not afraid to go to report the incident. We need to make sure that whistleblowers are protected. They cannot be standing in formation next to the rapist while the investigation continues. We need a complete solution that looks out for the rights of the victim from the second it is reported.
Thank you. I have a follow-up question. So if elected, what immediate action would you take to address this issue?
I would revamp the structure of having the JAG Corps serve as a judge and jury for, cases involving soldiers that are needing to be held accountable within their purview. And so we need to create an independent structure. So, I'd be working with members of Congress who've been fighting for and pushing on this for a long time to make it a reality. And that's going to be possible with the changing of parties in the Senate, because that's been the holdup. The House of Representatives is willing and able to reform this system, but there's been leaders in the Republican Party in Congress who have been unwilling to budge on making these changes. But I believe there's enough good men and women in the Senate and those that are forthcoming that will be willing to do the necessary job of addressing this once and for all.
I think Rudy hits the nail on the head with regards to the Senate. There's an awful lot of pressure from the United States military, the Department of Defense, in order to keep this under wraps. The degree to which it's infected the United States military in all branches, if it was made public in the way that it should be, would have a drastic effect on recruitment across the United States military, forcing a number of changes in the way we currently handle our DoD funding and recruiting, across the United States. So we need to take a look from that perspective. But one of the things that I think we'd be able to make happen in fairly short order is the embed units, where we have 2 or 3 sexual harassment and rape prevention representatives who do not report to the commanders within the units that they are embedded with. They need to be able to operate independently, and ideally with a civilian oversight that is not attached in any way to the unit the representatives will be tied to. That's one of the problems that we continue to see with our family readiness programs, is too often the supervisors of the programs become familiar with the commanders, and we end up with a situation where the people who have the greatest degree of separation from the unit are still too attached to the unit and interested in making sure that the officers and the soldiers, well, certain ones, definitely not the ones who were assaulted or raped, continue to be protected, to the benefit of the appearance of propriety for the units. So I think from that perspective, we get with the Joint Chiefs of Staff and work with them and say, hey, we need embeds that are not reporting to unit commanders They need to be independent of the chain of command. They need to be able to report to a civilian oversight authority directly rather than through cutouts that are able to squash reports and prevent these reports of military sexual trauma from reaching publicity.
All right, gentlemen, thanks again. And we're going to move on to the VA. And I'll actually be asking the next question. Although the VA has made several changes to address the length of time veterans have to wait for treatment, many facilities struggle with improving the health care needed in a timely manner. If elected, what will you do to ensure that people who have served our countries receive quality treatment quickly?
Yeah, so, you know, I can't speak from a firsthand perspective and experience on this front because, you know, even though I served about a decade in the Army National Guard, I really didn't get a lot of support and, you know, transition assistance that I can draw from in terms of how to improve it. Because so to me, that's a problem in and of itself. You know, that there's not a whole lot of education, at least for National Guard service members like myself. So I think that there needs to be a lot more education and assistance pre, you know, before you know, bring your service to an end. And so, you know, that's something that I definitely need to learn more about. But I definitely want to make sure that, you know, all of us that are eligible or should be eligible have access. And so that's really important, overdue, and we're at a time when there are so many service members that are reservists or National Guardsmen and women who are doing so much for this country through deployments or at home as AGR. So there's absolutely a need for more support. And a lot of it also, like I said, has to do with what people are entitled to. And then so there's you know, oftentimes there's a lack of guidance and support to let people know what they can tap into.
So this is an interesting situation because living in the Treasure Valley, the Boise VA Veterans Affairs is actually highlighted. It's one of those regional, well-performing regional centers, which is unusual for VAs across the United States. It's one of the best. So when you step back and you say, well, what can we do? You know, I'm looking at an organization with Marv Hagedorn, you know, at the helm that's been generally pretty good, with the exception that we continue to have problems for Idaho female veterans. We don't have the variety of staff necessary, so that sometimes when they go in to address issues, particularly feminine issues, certain staff won't look at them, won't set up the appointment simply because they don't have the escort available to make sure that the safety and precautions are in place. So we need to step back away from that. We need to step back away from the VA model and get to one of those situations where we put more of it out on the economy. That way, when a veteran goes in and they can't be seen immediately, there's an arrangement with local medical professionals, local psychologists, psych professionals, trauma-informed care professionals that are able to take those and run with them through contracts with the VA, or even just through Medicare for All or single payer programs based in the individual states. We definitely need to make sure that that care is available and we cut the red tape for those specialists that our veterans need to be able to see when they come back. We understand that there is a problem across the board with mental health. It continues to show up to the point where we have veterans that are burning themselves to death in VA parking lots across the United States just to prove a point. You know, when you reach a point where that looks like a viable option, we failed. You know, not just as the military, not just as the VA, even as a community, we have failed that service member to make sure that they have had the opportunity of the best care available. So I want to go back to the local volunteer program, because I think organizations like Idaho Veterans Network, Idaho Veterans Wellness Center, even the VFW and other organizations like that, Right for 22, continue to give these options and outlets that are positive, as well as provide that fraternal and sorority, that connection between brothers and sisters who have served, so that they have people they can call on. They have someone that they can talk to when things finally, when they start drifting down that. So we need to do more to bolster those networks post-service, so that people can go out and say, hey, I'm having a difficult time. Where they can say, I know you weren't there with me on that one, but I know you've been there. How did you get through it? And it's the peer networking afterwards and being able to promote that. I want to be able to see organizations like the IVN, IFBN, and Ride for 22 with that immediate outreach, be able to say, hey, we're here for you. And in the meantime, we need to tear the VA down to its nuts and bolts and rebuild it as the organization it should have been from the start. Because right now there are just too many problems in which failure is incentivized within the VA. And I don't know how to undo that kind of problem when it is so systemic throughout all the government organizations in the United States right now.
All right, thank you very much, Joe. And expanding on this topic further, you know, many veterans live in rural areas that require them to travel further than hundreds of miles to receive treatment at the VA hospital. Do you have any ideas or solutions to provide more accessible care to the veterans in these areas?
Yes, I do. We need to provide for infrastructure development. Right now, the chairman of the Federal Reserve, Jerome Powell, has been pushing for for Congress to be a little more bold about keeping our economy whole. And so right now, because of interest rates, would be the time for our government to take some bold action to put people back to work, to build out broadband and VA, medical facility construction, Indian Health Service construction, community health center construction in rural communities. We're among the hardest hit in the country right now by COVID, and it's just there's got to be better partnerships and collaborations between agencies within the Department of Health and Human Services to share funding and resources. And so, for instance, kind of like Joe mentioned, if someone can't be seen at a VA hospital, we do have some, great quality care facilities such as HRSA, the Health Resources Administration, the Indian Health Service up north in Coeur d'Alene. They have partnerships where they provide healthcare access for more than just members of the tribe. And in different places throughout the country, especially in rural communities, there are partnerships between, the Indian Health Service and the veterans, the VA. And we should further those and expand on those, but definitely bring broadband to rural communities so that, there's telehealth services and access that don't require people to travel so far if they just need to interface online like the rest of us are doing right now. So there's a lot that can and needs to be done, and right now is the time, because we're in the midst of a pandemic that's unlike anything we've seen in our lifetimes, or an entire generation or two.
And so I'm going to take the libertarian view on this one. Reason why is because I don't believe that the federal programs are going to be a solution to this. We need to be able to work it at the lowest level at the communities. And part of that is making sure that resources are returned to the community, or even better yet, they're not removed from the communities in the first place. If we can cut down the federal budget by bringing our troops home, making sure that they're stationed here in the United States so that the cost of force projection doesn't continue to inflate the DoD budget. Work with downsizing the administrative overhead that's associated with the Bureau of Veteran Affairs, making sure that there are other organizations and structures that continue to cost excessively, such as the overregulation of medical care in the United States. This will return those resources back to those communities so that we can make sure that those infrastructure opportunities are allowed to happen. 10 years ago, we were talking in the state of Idaho about broadband access across the entire state. This was originally intended for school purposes to make sure our children were able to receive an education via online. That we are now talking about being able to use that same infrastructure for the purpose of telehealth.
Well. I just wanted to tune in real quick. We're leaving Chicago right now.
Okay.
I just did a bunch of viral video content for upcoming videos, so stay tuned for that. We just dropped the...
It's not me.
All right, it looks like we had some audio interference there. I think it was coming from your end, Joe. Are you able to continue?
Results. I'm about to do
Okay,
that
give me a
interview
brief.
All right, while Joe Evans is working his technical issues with audio, we're going to move on to our next question, which will be, again, from Rosie with the Idaho Female Veteran Network on women in combat.
Thank you so much. So in both active duty branches and units right here home with the Idaho National Guard, women are integrating and serving in various combat arms occupational specialties. Are you supportive of allowing women to serve in all combat arms roles?
Absolutely. I know a lot of women that are tougher than many men that I know, just by virtue of them serving in the military at all. We have no leaders at the statewide elected level in Idaho or in Congress representing Idaho who have worn the uniform, yet we have, tens and tens of thousands of women who have. So I support women, electing to be a part of the draft. I think that equality should be consistent across the board. In one of our strongest allied countries, Israel, women, are heavily involved in combat roles. I see no reason why they shouldn't be, and of course there's, if the capacity is there, then there should be no question. And so, I'm 100% supportive of it. I've served with women in each of the, combat arms professions that I've been a part of. And lead, follow, or get out of the way.
I absolutely agree with integrating them into combat arms for the full spectrum, regardless of branch, whether it's Army, Marines, Navy, Air Force. I've had an awful lot of experience working with women who have been involved in the female engagement teams in both Iraq and Afghanistan. They've been able to go out and continue and maintain operations with the infantry platoons and squads that they've been embedded with as part of those female engagement teams. I continue to see operators, both for human intelligence as well as signal intelligence operators, that work with Special Operations Command all the time. They come out of these schools prepared to do things that honestly would challenge an awful lot of men that I've served with over the years. Some amazing women that I've worked with, both in 1st Special Forces Group, while I was a signals intelligence analyst there, as well as, you know, working with human teams and the female engagement teams. There isn't anything they can't do. There's no reason to keep them out of that if they want to participate.
Great. Let's expand further on that. What is your take on how the integration into the combat branches has gone thus far?
You know, so far as I'm concerned, it really just hasn't been a big issue. It kind of reminds me of when you know, LGBTQ members of the community were able to serve openly. I don't remember which year that was. Maybe it was 2012, 2010. I can't remember exactly, but I remember that was a big deal. It was a big announcement, and there was a lot of fear that there would be negative repercussions that were immediate and severe, you know, to the health and safety of those soldiers that openly, you know, profess their identity, who they are. And it just, I remember when the announcement was made, you know, I remember being alongside soldiers, and everybody was like, okay, moving on. Like, and so with the field artillery unit that I was a part of, women have always been there on the front lines in various roles. Maybe they didn't have that specific MOS, but they've been there. And so, you know, I think it's been a phased approach that, you know, is ramping up, and I'm all for it.
I think the problem we run into with the integration of women into combat arms more than anything else is the continued presence of predators within the ranks. And it doesn't matter which MOS, whether it's combat arms, service support, or support. There are predators, they do exist. So part of the integration is making sure that the women who become part of these combat teams understand that, you know, their bodily autonomy is not superseded by the welfare of the unit. The brothers and sisters should be looking out for their welfare, should be looking out for their health, should be making sure that they do not become a victim, survivor, warrior, you know, they don't fall prey to the predators that currently exist within our service. And this continues to be a problem, and it will continue to be a problem, particularly because during the surges in Iraq and Afghanistan, certain moral waivers were allowed to occur. This put individuals with records of domestic violence and sexual harassment in the service. It allowed them to serve right alongside the people that they would eventually end up preying upon. So we need to take a look at the issues with regards to the morale waivers. We need to make sure that the ROTC commands, as well as the academies, continue to support strong anti-sexual harassment and rape programs to the point where there is no doubt that this will be prosecuted to the fullest, so that these women feel safe again within the ranks. Really, that's going to be the hardest part of the integration. You know, it's not whether or not they're capable or not. They're capable. They can do the job. It's whether or not their brothers and sisters will look out for their welfare the way they are supposed to, rather than cover for the predators.
Thank you. And now my final question to wrap up my segment. So do you support women being required to register for selective service and being drafted if our country activates a draft?
I do.
I don't. Partly because I don't believe the draft is constitutional. I do not believe that the draft is something that we should have to resort to as a means to fill the ranks in the event of a war. I remember stories about World War I, World War II. We didn't need the draft. We had people stepping up and volunteering. We had the Abraham Lincoln Brigade in Spain, before the US even entered the war. Our young men and women in the United States believe in this country. They believe in protecting it. All they need is a good reason for it. They need a healthy reason where they understand they are going forth and protecting the people of the United States. 9/11 was one of those. We saw an incredible increase of recruitment during that time frame. The fact that the war dragged on as long as it did was part of the reason why we continued to use recruitment techniques and waivers, such as the moral waivers, that continued to cause deterioration in the effectiveness of our military. No, we need to do away with the draft altogether.
Are we able to do rebuttals, or just can I expand on mine?
Yes, you have 1 minute to rebut.
Yeah, I just wanted to say that, to give a little more context to it, for me, it's an easy answer, but it has to do with, being in a time and place where less than, I think, 2%, maybe it's 1% of our overall population, serves in the military. It's an incredible privilege, but it's also, the smallest of minorities within the country. And so, we're an entire generation, has lived their lifetimes while the country's been at war. It's been an endless war. Now, had there been a draft in place where people from, the most privileged backgrounds had to also, risk their son or daughter's lives for, our country's, overseas engagements, I think we wouldn't still be at war. There would be a plan for accomplishing the mission that we're set out, that we've set out to do in each of these instances. And so, we wouldn't, I just think that, we need shared sacrifice. And so if we're going to go to war and we're going to commit ourselves to that fully, we need to have that reflected throughout society.
All right, thank you very much, Rudy. And for the next topic, we're going to be talking about military voting. And here to ask that is Libby Bertner with the League of Women Voters. Libby, you have the floor.
Okay, thank you, Morgan. By law, and eligible family members are guaranteed the right to vote absentee in federal elections from anywhere in the world. The agency tasked with administering these laws is the Federal Voting Assistance Program. They provide absentee voting assistance to active duty military throughout the world and evaluate the effectiveness of these programs. Their last evaluation in 2016, the post-election voting survey on active duty military concluded that active duty service members have significantly lower registration and participation rates than citizen voting age population, particularly among women, minorities, and first-time voters. If elected, how will you ensure that every service member is encouraged to vote, provided with the tools to do so, and their votes are counted? Thank you.
Yeah, I'd be a big proponent. I am a big proponent of voter participation and civic engagement at all levels especially within our ranks. Anyone that served alongside me know that I've attracted a lot of attention to myself because of how politically involved I've always been, to the point of, you know, making a big deal about voting while at basic training, and asking for, you know, the ability to vote, or the ability to, you know, watch a debate, for instance. And so I vividly remember experiences where, you know, we were totally uninformed about what was going on, or how we were going to be able to, you know, vote, and inform ourselves. And so, you know, I'm for bringing about structural changes that will make it more easily accessible for soldiers to prioritize, to have access, and to prioritize voting. Similarly to, for instance, you know, faith-based services. Like, people should, you know, if it's it should be treated as a national holiday, moreover, for everybody, but especially for service members whose you know, lives are at risk by, you know, by raising their right hand and, you know, giving an oath to protect and defend this country at all costs. We should be at the forefront of folks that are pushed and prodded to vote.
I remember being deployed downrange, and one of the last things I was really interested in was the politics that were going on in Boise, Idaho. And really, I think that's the ultimate problem, because the voter registration program is part of the quarterly training brief that every commander has every 3 months. They go through and check how many of your soldiers are aware of the remote voting program, how many of them participate. This is a key performance measure in order for a lot of commanders to receive an excellent rating as part of the process. I think this is really dependent more on the local leadership to make sure that that information gets out. Do we care who's president? Yes, well, we're on the pointy end of the stick. We sort of like to know who's pointing us in the right direction. But as far as local and being able to stay involved in our local communities that we will eventually retire to or separate and go back to with our families, where we want to be able to influence it so that we come back to the same place we left. We really need to see stronger participation at the local level, whether that's city, county, or even state, to make sure that we are aware downrange. And we can talk about the federal responsibility, but ultimately the people in charge of that aren't going to know who's going to be elected, you know, who's on the ballot for mayor or city council in Boise, you know, come 2021. Our service members that are deploying from Boise forward, they're not informed of that measure. So I really think we need to get back to the local measure, make sure that it's taken care of at the local level, because our Ada County registrar knows who's deployed. They got addresses for all of them. Have them step up. You know, an extra quarter to make sure a stamp goes on, you know, one of the, on the mayor's ballot, you know, on the mayor's information. I think we can do it that way rather than making sure that it becomes a federal responsibility. And one of the great things about COVID is remote voting, mail-in voting. It's become a priority across the nation. You know, it's no longer just something that the troops do while they're downrange. We've taught people how to do that here at home now. So it's not that much of a stretch to take that extra little bit and make sure that what we've taught our people to do locally as far as mail-in voting is extended to make sure that our service members downrange and serving in other states or even in other countries continue to receive the benefit of what we've learned from COVID-19.
Thank you, Joe. All right, we're going to be moving on to another topic, the F-35, and I'll be asking that question. With Boise not being chosen as one of the primary sites for the F-35 mission, what are your stances on one day eventually replacing the aging A-10 fleet with a new fighter mission, and what does that mean for the local economy. And there's also the possibility of there not being a fighter replacement. It could be
I didn't hear the last part of the question.
Here, I'll go ahead and ask that again. So what are your stances on eventually replacing the A-10 fleet with a new fighter mission? And if not a fighter mission, what are your stances on fighting to get an airframe to replace the A-10 in the future? And what does that mean for the local economy?
You know, coming from a military background and being a veteran makes me supportive of you know, bringing missions here that would further our economy, grow our ranks, our troop numbers, you know, invigorate our local economy, and, you know, boost our, you know, ability to train, protect, and defend, you know, our communities and our country as a whole. So I'm fully supportive of it. I think it's regrettable that it didn't happen. You know, I understand the concerns that have to do with noise issues that people raise. But to the extent that that could be mitigated, I'm fully for figuring out workarounds to, you know, make that workable. And yeah, I mean, I think we need to try and, you know, still pursue that.
I think the airframes that we currently have existing out at Gallup Field are adequate for what our mission is going to be. I'm not a big fan of the F-35 for a number of reasons. While I was in Afghanistan, one of my missions was responsible for taking a look at intercepted communications, particularly when we were looking at specific targets. When we flew the F-35 mission in support of special operations to target the ground in those locations, the F-35 flew low and slow. Reason why is because it was loud, it was black. It was the wings of death that the Iraqis and Afghanis heard at night. Now, right now, we have a large war refugee population here in Treasure Valley, everything considered, of Iraqis and Afghanis who lived under the threat of the F-35. To continue to set up and pursue that particular mission, especially when the F-35 has not proven itself as a contemporary functional combat plane, simply because it's too heavy, it's too loud, and it lacks the maneuverability, and it simply does not live up to its description of being radar proof. I think we need to take a look at doing away with the F-35 mission across the board, not just stop pursuing it here in the state of Idaho, but take a look at it in our military altogether. We still continue to have planes that operate and function on par or better than the most advanced of the Russian and Chinese MiGs at this point, whereas the F-35, I don't feel is capable of a combat mission as either an interceptor or being able to run, you know, the bombing missions under threat of anything other than what we don't face in Afghanistan and Iraq. Said the infrastructure that's been planned, that's been talked about, it's too loud, it's costly, it won't do a significant benefit to the Treasure Valley, except for a very few contractors that'll be brought on board that'll benefit disproportionately from the expenditures to bring everything up to speed. The F-35 mission will take our National Guardsmen out of, or will inject them into the rotations of inflicting terror in other countries, which I don't feel is an appropriate use of National Guard resources. Friend of mine, Dan McKnight's a very big fan of Defend the Guard. So until we actually declare war via Congress, you know, the mission that we would take on with the F-35 would immediately become null and void, since our primary purpose at this point is support operations in the war of terror. Yes, war of terror, not on terror. We need to bring our troops home. We need to reimagine our military, and we need to do the downsizing necessary in order to make sure that we can become combat effective again after 20 years of operations in the Middle East.
All right, gentlemen, thank you very much. We're going to move on to the next topic, Idaho Army National Guard civil unrest mobilizations. So later this month, tentatively on July 30th, the SecDef will be receiving an after-action review that is intended to analyze how the National Guard was utilized alongside local and federal law enforcement during the recent periods of civil unrest. To date, there were several isolated incidents involving National Guard soldiers hurt or killed by civilians and vice versa, or an alleged improper use of military medical helicopters to disperse protesting crowds. Do these incidences create the potential to revisit policy on future use of National Guard for similar missions? And if so, what would your stance on such a policy revision be?
Yeah, so for me, I would just say, you know, as a former military policeman in the nation's capital, I'm very, very familiar with the local capabilities and the number of agencies that are on hand and available to help mitigate unrest. You know, it was a responsibility that, you know, I was trained for and involved with helping for operations ranging from the inauguration to, you know, the Pope's visit, large events. There was no need for Idaho to deploy the contingent of National Guard troops. If I were one of them, I would have enjoyed that because, you know, it was a 5-day trip, but it probably took 5 days. You know, it was just I'm sure an insanely expensive endeavor, and the number of people that had to support making that possible just made it just the largest waste of resources in recent history by you know, the Idaho National Guard at the, you know, governor's discretion. And so I think that was more than unwise. It was wasteful. I stand with the generals like Mattis, you know, Milley, and others who were critical and strongly against, and spoke out strongly against the use of active duty troops and troops from outside those regions. There's just more than enough capabilities locally, and people that serve in those guard units from those places know their community. So it's unnecessary provocation, like we're seeing in Portland, for instance, where, you know, those are not, you know, military troops, they're federal forces. It's not even made clear, you know, which departments or agencies they're from, but it's escalating tensions. It should be law enforcement first and foremost, and then it should be, you know, brought up to another level from there. But I'm 100% for, you know, protecting persons and property. So that's, you know, non-negotiable. But you don't need to jump straight to, you know, using helicopters and, you know, tear gas on people. There's a lot of steps in between that can bring down tensions, allow people the freedom to assemble and exercise their First Amendment rights.
There's an awful lot of civil unrest across the United States right now. We see it in Minneapolis, we see it in Atlanta, we see it in Portland, we see it everywhere. The use of National Guard troops, every time they've been integrated for riot control or crowd control, has usually ended up in disaster. You know, whether we're talking Kent State, whether we're talking Berkeley, a number of other opportunities in which governors have deployed the National Guard in support of riots, protests, particularly race riots across the southern United States over the years. Recently, you take a look at what happened when they deployed the National Guard in Atlanta to protect the airport from eventual rioters. We saw video come out of that, pictures of what were 3 very, very young National Guardsmen holding riot shields and batons that were larger than they were. These young servicemen, these young National Guardsmen, were not properly trained in order for riot control. They were stuck in a situation that they were uncomfortable with. They didn't actually know what to do. And a lot of them were probably sympathetic to the people that they had to face down. And that makes it for a really awkward situation. Now, I agree using with Rudy, the use of active duty troops is a violation of the Posse Comitatus. You know, so we couldn't actually use military troops, which was why they mobilized the National Guard for operations in DC, despite the fact that they weren't used, and raised an interesting debate over the Third Amendment rights and whether or not you could house people and house troops in public housing inside a city that didn't want you there. No, those soldiers were trained for maybe 2 or 3 MOSs in order to fill roles within the units in the National Guard. They are part of their communities. They have a mission to support emergency operations within their communities, preferably other than staring down somebody, a friend over a riot shield. You know, we continue to support flood relief, damage control, emergency, regional disaster issues along the lines of Cajun Navy results, where we send our National Guardsmen out to solve problems that were beyond our local community to handle. So I do not condone the deployment of National Guard troops as a form of crowd control or riot control, nor the use of those services against our citizens simply because somebody feels that they've lost control and they need to do something desperate to get that control back.
All right, gentlemen, thank you very much. Expanding on National Guard related issues, we have CW5 Michelle Hartley with the National Guard Association of the U.S. Ms. Hartley, you have the floor.
Good evening. Thank you, gentlemen, both again for joining us and taking the time out of your day to answer these questions. As a guardsman and a member of the over 500,000 guardsmen, both Air and Army of the United States, one of the challenges we have is a guardsman serving 20 years of good service has to maintain the exact same requirements as their active duty counterparts, from physical, education, MOS specific, and all certifications involved. But if they do not serve 180 consecutive days of Title X service at the end of 20 years, they do not receive veterans benefits. And earlier in the evening, you were both talking about the importance of veterans benefits for health care, mental care, etc. So my question is, how would you support changing the law in order for members of the Guard at the end of their 20 years of service, if they had not achieved their 180 days, how would you support awarding them with veterans benefits? Not veterans status, but veterans benefits.
Yeah, I would say, you know, for me, it would be looking at the range of services and training and activations that they participated in, and you know, looking holistically at their service track record, and not having it just based on an arbitrary number of days. You know, we've fallen into some traps here with that. For instance, with some of these activations that happened recently to you know, you know, these activations with the civil to address the civil unrest, to, you know, for troops to be thrown at you know, trying to, you know, deal with the rioting and with the destruction. My understanding was that there were that there were a number of days that were limited by perhaps 24 hours or 1 day, so that it wouldn't trigger the eligibility for benefits, for TRICARE, for healthcare access. That, to me, it's just shameful. It's shocking, and we shouldn't be trying to, as a government, we shouldn't have, agency leaders at the top who are trying to figure out how to shortchange our troops. We should have people who appreciate their value and recognize it with more than words. And our problem is that we have too many people at the top, especially here in Idaho in statewide elected office and in Congress, who've never worn their uniform. And so if we have more veterans represented in government at all levels, they will not be seeking to shortchange us. And that's how I think we will change that. And we need to be looking more specifically at holistic ways to evaluate whether a soldier that, sailor, airman, Marine, Coast Guard member, et cetera, has holistically met a threshold to where they should be eligible for benefits, not just, in an arbitrary way based on the number of days.
Thank you.
One of the things that we deal with downrange is the individuals who would show up to do a tour in country. They'd show up on the 29th or the 30th of the month and turn around and leave on the 2nd. They'd spend less than a week in country, yet collect 2 months hazard duty pay because of their visit rotation and the way they timed it. This problem continues to exist across the military. The pay is always being gamed. The enlisted are always being gamed. There is a process in order to make sure certain amounts of money are spent. My personal view on this is that they signed on the dotted line. They went to basic training. There's a very real possibility that while in basic training, they could have been called up to service and never returned to their National Guard unit and simply sent forward to be activated from that position. Didn't happen, but it was within the realm of possibility. I honestly think upon completion of basic training, award of veteran status, as well as award of veteran benefits, regardless of 20 years, should be awarded. And part of that is because of my belief that a lot of the way we handle boot camp right now, the way we handle that initial entry training, is post-traumatic stress injury just to complete. Call it a rite of passage. It hurts a lot of people deep in their soul. Give them those benefits. Make it happen.
Thank you. And yes, I agree. As a follow-up with that, both the veterans benefits and then my next topic would increase the already over $700 billion Department of Defense bill. An analogy that I was given, which is really fantastic actually, is when a guardsman shows up to drill and to do a weapons qualification. The National Guard provides them a weapon, they provide them the bullets. They don't expect them to bring their own bullets and they don't expect them to bring their own weapons to qualify. However, a guardsman is expected to pay for their own health care and they are expected to provide that. It is not provided for them like their active duty counterparts. What is your stance on current legislature and current conversation of providing the National Guardsmen TRICARE for life while they're actively serving and then on into retirement?
I would love to say that I'm fully for it, in every single way. But in terms of cost and being realistic and pragmatic about it, I think that there should be a tiered approach to, you can gain more benefits if you do more. I'm as a veteran who served in the Guard for almost 10 years, I definitely know that there's a better approach to providing wraparound services to support Guard members so that they'll stay in for life. I would be one of those people. So I'm definitely for creating incentives for recruitment and retainment that would be beneficial for us all, just as a country, to have a reliable and strong, sizable force that is, ready and capable of helping, meeting, our country's public health needs by making sure that people, aren't slipping through the cracks. And so I'm definitely willing to look at any proposal that would seek to make sure that people have healthcare coverage. So that's why I'm supportive of a public option as a way to get people who are uninsured, underinsured, unemployed, not old enough for Medicare, not poor enough, or don't meet the poverty threshold to qualify for Medicaid. So, I'm all about trying to make sure everybody has some sort of coverage. And so I think this could be one way where, we could meet that, shore up our system to make sure that people all have coverage. And so making sure that everybody who's, a reservist or National Guards man or woman has TRICARE. I'm 100% for it. And yes, I do think that it should be paid for by the United States military and not out of pocket by the service member.
And Ms. Hartley, one of the problems that we look at with regards to the cost, $700 billion budget, 725, I believe, was the last National Defense Authorization Act, is the amount of fraud, waste, and abuse that continues to persist within the release for that bill. Pork barrel projects. I mean, what was it? It wasn't that long ago when we bought a division worth of tanks after the Army told us that we didn't need them. So we need to work on fixing the budget within the DoD itself. It continues to be the problem. In addition to that, we have the costs associated with current force projection issues, as well as maintaining the size of the military we have, including 11 aircraft carrier fleets that are currently deployed around the world at this time. We can bring a significant number of those back into DOC, reduce the number of flag officers that exist within our service structure, within our ranks, so that we can get it down to a manageable level. I mean, literally, we should be able to cut our Department of Defense budget by 50%, still have the largest, most advanced military in the world, and be able to make sure that healthcare for all of our service members, whether they are active duty, reserve, or National Guard, is taken care of as part of their enlistment or officer program. I mean, this is one of those things. We ask them to step up and volunteer to serve roles in our community, to serve roles around the world, to defend our nation. We need to at least make sure that their health care is taken care of.
Thank you very much. That's all I have, Morgan.
All right, thank you, Ms. Hartley, and thanks, gentlemen. And we're going to move on to the next topic, deployments. So presidential candidates have recently suggested that Americans need to consider a higher tax rate if the U.S. is to continue with combat deployments overseas. Do you feel this is a proper course of action for continued funding of ongoing operations?
Can you restate that?
Sure thing. So presidential candidates have recently suggested that Americans need to consider a higher tax rate if the U.S. is to continue with combat deployments overseas. Do you feel this to be a proper course of action for the continued funding of ongoing operations?
I mean, I think that would mean that we'd be drawing down a lot of, foreign engagements, because if people felt like they were directly, paying for that, which we are, because, just as taxpayers, but if it was felt in a, direct way, I think that would quickly bring down the number and level of foreign engagements that we're currently committed to. And so I am for doing more nation building at home. I think we've really shunned our responsibility to do that. I think we spend a lot abroad that could be, better spent here at home, increasing the quality of life for our kids here. And so, I definitely don't support, increasing taxes and tying that specifically to whatever our foreign engagement, foreign, military engagements are. But I am for, doing whatever is required that would make us focus more at getting our own house in order.
This is the end result of us having kicked the can down the road for the last 20 years. The reason why is because in 2001, when we entered Afghanistan, we should have gone to an historical war tax rate. We should have been looking at 90% tax on the top earners in the United States. This would have done two things. One, it would have paid for the war in Afghanistan and the war in Iraq. Two, it would have made sure those wars were short. We would have won them already if we'd started taxing appropriately from the day we entered country. This was a failure of the Bush administration. It was a failure of the Obama administration. It's a failure of the Trump administration right now. 20 years we've been kicking this can down the road. We knew the bill was going to come due. Bring our troops home. Get them stateside. Fix the economy. Then pay off the debt. We can't afford to continue doing nation building around the world. We cannot continue to use our service members to serve corporate interests in other countries, including maintaining and managing the flow of oil reserves, whether strategic or not. We need to seek other options, and we can't do that as long as we continue to support the war for oil, the war for gold in foreign nations. Bring our troops home. Stop deploying them to support these operations other than war. Let's take time to heal our country.
All right, gentlemen, thank you very much. And we're going to move on to the final topic of the evening, which covers defense spending. And first question, based on the administration's priorities on near-term technologies, research, and development, they're requesting $108 billion for DoD R&D and acquisition. Does this keep American defense on the forefront of innovation in driving STEM, science, technology, engineering, and mathematics fields, and surpassing similar efforts by our adversaries?
I would say yes. I would support efforts to further research and development in the fields of STEM. But what we need to do is figure out ways to redirect funds toward our workforce to get more, young people who are unemployed or underemployed, educated or trained in skills, so they can, qualify for jobs here with, contractors and manufacturers that can contribute to those efforts. And so far as I'm seeing and understanding, we have a lack of educated citizenry who are not supported to pursue their potential and provided with livable wages that can help them be a part of forging a future that is going to help us boost our nation's capabilities from top to bottom. So really, a lot of that spending that you're referencing is going to other parts of the country, and here, you know, we just have people that are totally left behind. And so, while I support that for our country, you know, I see a need to figure out how to bring back funding and resources for STEM and education and workforce priorities here at home, so that, you know, our young people have the education and resources required to participate in the 21st economy and to contribute. And so, you know, not having broadband or internet access and being, you know, stuck at home but totally left behind is shameful. And that makes it to where pretty much many from throughout our entire state are totally, you know, at the bottom of the barrel. And so to me, that's really shameful. That's why I will wrap up my answer here by saying we need to support Reclaim Idaho's ballot initiative to get education funding certified so that people can vote on that and get our kids, you know, the education they deserve.
One of the problems with the use of the military for the STEM operations and boosting is the weaponization of the training, the weaponization of the education. When you go into that and you start taking a look at the options, a lot of this training, the engineering, could go towards issues like agriculture, such as what we're doing in eastern Idaho right now, or even in northern Idaho, being able to look at other options besides weapons of war as a method for doing the education and training. That said, I do understand that war is a key driver in innovation, simply because a lot of the technologies that we learn and develop while in conflict continue to support operation, continue to find other uses after the fact. You know, when war is done, we beat our plowshare, or we beat our swords into plowshares, and we go on with life. And this continues to show post-World War I, post-World War II, a lot of that technology that we learned during those time frames, even Vietnam, what we did with Agent Orange, you know, we continue to use today to support agriculture across the United States. You know, that may not have been the best example, but, you know, that's where we got our Roundup from. I think we can make better use of our money. But I do believe that the STEM research process, particularly the non-disclosure agreements that we go through when we enter into agreements with universities across the United States, is far more secure than what our current operations are, where we are buying, purchasing, and asking multinational corporations to do our research and development for us. We've already run into problems with a number of organizations that have turned around and taken technology that we paid them to develop for us and integrated them into foreign military weaponry and organizations. That includes our aircraft, our tanks, our night vision devices. If we gotta invest in military research and development, let's make sure it's invested through our universities so that we have those non-disclosure agreements to guarantee that that research does not leave the United States.
All right, gentlemen, thank you very much. And lastly, Department of Defense contractors. Again, expanding on the spending issue within the DoD. What roles do you feel that the Department of Defense contractors have with working within the military? Specifically, as some of you know who have been downrange, many military occupational specialties have over time been replaced by DoD contractors. And currently, our DoD is spending well over billions of dollars on contracts right now within multiple operational facets, downrange and even in garrison. Again, what role do you feel that these contracts play within our military and the implications they have on our service members?
To me, that question relates a lot almost to, it's kind of like the influence of big money in politics. It's like, you know, if you have people that, you know, more or less, you know, have a conflict of interest involved with more or less like a revolving door situation, then, you know, it's furthering foreign entanglements or prompting us to go to war when people, you know, want to utilize, you know, funding or get larger contracts. You know, it's a situation that definitely deserves much more scrutiny, accountability, oversight, and investigations. There's a lot of runaway spending where, you know, budgets need to be capped. And, you know, often I think there's a lot of outsourcing that occurs that could be, when it comes to, you know, defense contracting, of activities that could be handled internally within the ranks and structure of the military. And so I think the profit-driven motive of defense contractors and that revolving door dynamic is one that we really, you know, need to rein in and exercise a lot more oversight and investigation responsibilities that lie in the hands of Congress. But when you have people who are taking, you know, insane amounts of money from lobbyists, from defense contractors, it makes it to where it's hard for them to want to do anything about, you know, fulfilling their job, because they rely on those people to fund their campaigns. So that's why I'm proud to be supporting my candidacy with individual small dollar donations almost entirely. And I think that's the same approach we have to take when it comes to bringing about a better system of government where people that are serving in office, that are exercising their duty of oversight and investigation, are not conflicted. And so I'd say that, yeah, we got to rein that in.
One of the issues with the contractors downrange is it's a numbers game. Each year, Congress authorizes a certain number of soldiers downrange. Now, this is the number of service members that are allowed to go. So we can put 15,000 troops in Afghanistan. We can put 30,000 troops in Iraq. Problem is how do you set up that arrangement? Do you want 15,000 trigger pullers, or do you want 5,000 trigger pullers and the 10,000 support groups, support MOSs and organizations? What ended up happening was we wanted 15,000 trigger pullers in country, and we ended up paying contractors to the tune of nearly 3 to 1 to support those individuals downrange. This includes service support, armed forces, the shops, the boutiques, the mechanics, whether or not we were performing maintenance on the helicopters and the various other aircraft. A lot of that was turned over to contractors in order to prevent going over the number that we were authorized, to make sure that we had trigger pullers conducting combat operations in theater. It was an extremely dangerous precedent, and it continues to this day. And it's a number of games that hides the amount of U.S. personnel that are in country at any given time. How many soldiers do we have there? Yes, we got a specific number. They don't take time to let you know that in addition to the soldiers and service members that we have in country, we have 5 times that number of contractors that are getting paid roughly 6 times what the service member would be paid to do the exact same thing. We need to do away with the contract process. period. Thank you.
All right, gentlemen, thank you very much. This brings us to the end of our program. And before we close out for evening, we're going to give each candidate 2 minutes exactly to provide a closing statement, and then we're going to wrap up for the evening. Thank you.
We've been going for a while, so I'm going to keep mine short and sweet and just say, you know, thank you for allowing me to participate. It was really great. Thank you to the Idaho, you know, Veterans Wellness Institute organization. It's a privilege. You know, I felt at home. I want to thank Joe for your service to our country and your pursuit of a second service. You know, I believe that we need more veterans in office at every level. I think it reflects poorly on our state that we lack representation in statewide elected positions or in Congress. And that's something that needs to change, and it can change here in 2020. I want to encourage people to check out my website, rudysoto.us, and my social media handles. If you have any concerns or issues that you would like to raise with us that you think we should champion and make more prevalent and forge to the forefront of the conversation throughout the course of the rest of the campaign, I'm very much willing and interested to hear those. And I'm eager to work with you all, regardless of the outcome. And it's truly an honor to be here with y'all. And I hope to connect with you in person when we all get through this. And thank you.
I'd like to thank the Idaho Veterans Wellness Center, League of Women Voters for inviting me to this forum this evening. It's really a great opportunity to discuss these issues with Rudy. I think he's got some really good opinions that we can all move forward with as far as ways to accomplish things and get things done. My big issue, of course, is bring our troops home. The war is over. We no longer need to be there. We no longer need to support operations in other countries around the globe right now. Bring our troops home. Repeal the National Defense Authorization Acts. Repeal the Patriot Act. And defend the Guard. There's no reason the Guard should be going anywhere outside of the United States short of a formal declaration of war as constitutionally obligated via Congress. It's time for peace, not just here in America, but around the world. And it's time to end our role in the destruction. I honestly feel that the empire has come home with the events that have transpired over the last few weeks. And we really need to step back and take a soul deep look at what we want America to be in the coming days. Thank you again for inviting me. I really appreciate the opportunity. Have a good evening.
Thanks, Joe.
All right, gentlemen, thanks again. And also special thanks to National Guard Association of the US, CW5 Hartley, and of course the League of Women Voters for joining us tonight. For everyone that's tuning in, tomorrow on the 22nd, we will have this forum again, night number 2. We'll be covering Congressional District 2 candidates. And on night 3 of the following day, we'll be covering US Senate. And again, you can follow on Facebook at Idaho Veteran Wellness. Thanks again, and have a good night.
Thank you.